Hello and welcome to another Ray Bradbury Experience Museum virtual session. Today we will be continuing with our chronicling of the Martian Chronicles, and we will be speaking to the author of the book How to Mars, a fictitious account of a reality TV show on the planet Mars from Tachyon Publishers. So please stay tuned and we'll be with you in a moment. So let me introduce David. David, please introduce yourself to the Ray Bradbury Experience Museum virtual sessions.
Well, thanks for having me. My name's David Ebenbach, and I'm a writer, and I am chronically preoccupied with the human condition, which actually turns out a very productive thing to be. At this point, I'm the author of 8 books of fiction, poetry, and nonfiction, and my latest one, this spring, Tachyon Publications is publishing my first novel in science fiction, which is How to Mars. Sort of doesn't totally hold up in the virtual background. And that's out this spring. And you can see in this, let me be totally frank, doctored photograph that I have behind me, that Perseverance even has a copy on Mars, because those nights get pretty long. You need something to read for sure.
I would like to take a moment because we did have Dr. Sarah Milkovich, who worked on the Perseverance, and how cool is it to have the book out as Perseverance is on the planet Mars right now, and Mars is in the collective unconscious for us.
It's great, and I have to say it goes both ways. On the one hand, it's fun for the book because people are thinking about Mars and cool things are happening there. But on the other hand, because I'm thinking about the book and this Mars thing is happening, I'm kind of obsessed with Perseverance myself.
Yeah.
I was hooked into the live feed. Minutes before this totally successful landing, one of the scientists says, about half of these Mars missions fail completely. And, my heart dropped in my stomach. A lot of drama. And they released the first photos. They released the first sounds from Mars, and you're sitting there listening to wind. And I was very emotionally caught up in the whole thing, and still am.
So, in your book, it's a reality TV show set on Mars. So, tell us more about that. How you write about the human condition, everything like that. I'd like to get into that a little bit more.
Yeah. So do you remember the Mars One project at all? Did that ever get on your radar?
It's not on my radar, no.
So it was this crazy thing. I think it technically still exists, but it's on hiatus. This, I think, Dutch company decided, hey, we're going to send a bunch of people to Mars on a one-way mission. They've got to live there the rest of their lives. We're taking applications, and we're going to fund the whole thing with a reality TV show. And as a person who is particularly obsessed with when people start behaving strangely, that story really caught my attention. So I followed it really closely. And according to them, hundreds of thousands of people sent in applications to be people who would leave Earth forever and never feel a breeze on their face again, never see the people they love in 3D again. It turns out probably the number of applications was quite a bit lower than they said, but still a lot of people applied. So I got really, really interested in what they were doing. Does it turn out that it's maybe a scam, the whole thing? Possibly. It's hard to say, but they've kind of gone, they've gone dark at this point. But by the time that they were falling apart, I guess, I was too hooked to stop. So I had started writing about this weird organization that wanted to send people to Mars. I fictionalized the whole thing, of course, and funding it with a reality show, filming the Marsonauts. And my organization, Destination Mars, ! Has the same rule that Mars One did, which is no sex on Mars. It was like this big thing, like can't do it. Really dangerous to be pregnant on Mars, to give birth on Mars, really a bad idea. But the first line of my novel is, this is how I find out Jenny is pregnant on Mars. Because 2 of them have been breaking the rule, of course. And the novel follows them as they go through this first Martian pregnancy. and try to figure out how this is all going to work on Mars. So Mars One kind of stopped, and I kept going.
You kept going from there. So I would also like to talk about just the theme of, Ray has the theme of reality television. You know, if we look at Fahrenheit 451, definitely the Michael B. Jordan film definitely ran with that, and folks can see that now on HBO Max. So you are honoring Ray not only in Martian Chronicles, but in Fahrenheit 451. Would you like to talk about, you know, Ray Bradbury on your radar? Is he an influence, or how, other works of Ray Bradbury that speak to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like a lot of people, I grew up with Ray Bradbury.
Yeah,
And maybe first it was the dinosaur stories and the Velt and things like that,
yeah,
the shorter pieces, but it was pretty quickly, it was Fahrenheit 451 and Something Wicked This Way Comes and The Illustrated Man and Martian Chronicles, of course. And as an adult, I teach creative writing. I've taught from his Zen and the Art of Writing, which students enjoy a lot. So he's been a pretty big part of my life, more of the books actually than the movie versions of
yeah.
what he's done. I actually haven't seen, I love Michael B. Jordan, but I haven't seen the movie version of Fahrenheit 451, but read the books and loved them. And I think one of the things that I like the best about Ray Bradbury in general is I think, and he's even said as much, that he's much more interested in the people than he is in the science about it. So
Yeah.
if you take a look at, for example, Martian Chronicles, he really thrived on the fact that in 1950, we didn't know that much about the planet. So he gets to put canals full of water. He gets to have birds. He gets to have air you can breathe. There are Martians who have families and who are psychic and can do all kinds of
Yeah.
great things. So he gets to run with his imagination, or what he calls, I guess, pure myth, instead of being too worked up about, well, how exactly scientifically would that operate? And he thinks that that makes it endure longer. And you see that in a book like Fahrenheit 451 too, which was way ahead of its time in terms of censorship. Not only that, but also, as you're saying, like people's investment in spectacle, and wanting to watch, people be crazy and do crazy things. I think he and Kurt Vonnegut had a lot in common in that sense. So yeah, I think he's paved the way for a lot of us, and I'm definitely in that group.
Yeah, I've often said that they are the yin and the yang, you know, the light and the dark of writing about humanity.
Yeah.
As far as Vonnegut and Bradbury go, the I would also like to touch on not only your writing, your science fiction writing, but you said you are a poet, and Bradbury said that he is, you know, he sees himself as a poet that got locked in as a science fiction writer. So would you like to expand on yourself as a poet writing about the human condition?
Yeah. I think it was Aldous Huxley who first told him that he was a poet, and it was this
Yeah,
kind of great moment of revelation
yeah,
for Bradbury. Um, I think it's a shame if anybody gets locked in anywhere. We're really fortunate, obviously, that Bradbury did so much writing in the vein of science fiction, but I hate to think of anybody being stuck anyplace. And I think the reason that I'm interested in all these forms, I even write some plays occasionally and write nonfiction, is an idea comes up, it bubbles up in you, and you've got to find a place to put it where it'll work. And sometimes it'll work as a piece of fiction, and sometimes it won't. And it would work better as a poem. And if you're not writing poems, then you lose it
yeah,
forever, which seems to me kind of a tragedy. So I bounce around quite a bit. And my next book after this book is a collection of poetry called What's Left to Us by Evening, but that's not out till 2022. So I bounce around, and when something bubbles up that wants to be a poem, I say, let's do that. And when it wants to be a short story, let's do that. When it wants to be a novel, let's do that. I just like to follow things around rather than try and distort them to make them fit into something that I'm supposed to be doing. Who wants to be doing what you're supposed to be doing?
No one wants to be doing that. So that actually is a great transition as far as I wanted to go into the writing process. Since you do teach writing, you do touch on Ray's book, Zen and the Art of Writing, which I think is a wonderful book. Can you go into why that book in particular you chose to share with your students and go a little more into that?
Yeah, well, when I first, this is a little teacher secret, I think.
Yeah.
When I first taught it to students, it's because secretly I wanted to read it and I hadn't read it yet. So I said, this will force me to do it. And there are way too many books that have ended up on my syllabi for that reason, but it's always good because then I get to enjoy them. And I knew he was reliable, and that it was going to be great. But the thing that I think I liked about him and that the students liked about him is how energetic he is, and how, I mean, you talked about the yin and the yang.
Yeah.
Something really cheerful about the way that Bradbury thinks about writing. It's realistic. You know, he says you need to put in all these hours to get good, and 10,000 hours. But he's so energetic and cheerful about the process. Like, oh, it's fun. You know,
Yeah.
you have to write with verve. You have to put your personality in there. And I think for young people who maybe are getting a huge dose of writing is very serious, that it could be a great antidote to some of that stuff. So I liked him a lot for that.
Yeah, he doesn't shy away that you're gonna toll away in obscurity, and you're gonna, what's his thing? Yeah, if I wrote a story a week for a year, at least one of them had to be good. He's all about you have to put the work in.
Right, he
And
sees that as good news, right? Well, one of
yeah,
them's going to be good, and
yeah,
the young writer's like, "What? How many stories?"
yeah, he definitely put in the work.
Yeah.
So I would also like you to talk a little bit more about Tachyon as a publisher and the work that they're putting out, because they're putting out some amazing things, and how folks can find them to not only order your book, but some of the other things that they are putting out there, because they're putting out some amazing pages out there for us to read.
I'd say, first of all, that's superb advice.
Yeah.
Just everybody, you can even pause this and
Yeah.
just buy some stuff from Tachyon and come back.
Yeah.
It's, to my mind, it's really rooted in the people who are there. I think they have an unbelievable staff, and that means like head editor, like Jacob Weissman, but it also means Jill Robertson, managing editor, means Jamie Go, who did most of the editing on my book. It means their publicity staff. It means Elizabeth Story, who did the cover of my book and does all their social media. It's it's an amazing group of people, and not just that they're good at their jobs, but they're really fun.
There was a point before I knew Tachyon as Tachyon, where I would just buy the books, and then once I knew the logo, I went to my bookshelf and I said, oh, they do all these great, amazing books. And they also do a great thing where they make sure you don't forget amazing writers, that they don't get lost to the shelf too. They keep great, amazing writers in print too.
In print and on social media. I mean,
And social media too.
They're sort of relentlessly creative. When I'm talking to Jim or Paul or Rick in publicity, they always have a new idea for how to get stuff out there. They made this connection with you. There are tons of things that they do. So there's so much energy and excitement about the things that they're publishing. And they do publish a number of titles a year, but they make sure they have enough time to really devote to each one. And it's a range of things. So they do some stuff for kids and YA. They do stuff that pretty much just for adults. They do fantasy, science fiction, things that are kind of hard to classify, but all of it is really has this element, I think, of the unexpected, that it's not going to be the last book you picked up that was about Mars or about aliens or about unicorns. It's going to do something that that book didn't do. There's Cameron Hurley has a great book, Meet Me in the Future, that they published. It's a bunch of short stories, but all of them are these really interesting angles on gender and how that might play out in different ways. Maybe not all of them, but most of them. on other planets and other situations. And each one is a kind of a revelation. So there's a great book called Central Station. Uh,
Yes.
you know that one,
Yeah.
yeah.
And they
And
even collect Kinsella's sports short stories. Where are all those collected? Where you can probably catch, Shoeless Joe easily because of Field of Dreams, but how often can you easily find, his collection of sports short stories, which all have that element of magical realism, if you enjoy that a lot of the times. So there's something for everyone there,
yeah,
particularly your book also.
yeah, I'm very happy that it's with them. I really think I've been fortunate in my life to work with a lot of great presses, but this
Yeah.
is, and I don't just say this because here we are in the situation, they really
Yeah.
have been the best to
Yeah.
work with. So much energy, so much fun. We'll get into kind of pun back and forths on email where
Yeah.
we've just left business behind and are just
Yeah.
coming up with space puns. So they have just a great enthusiasm for the work. And yeah, the short story is, kind of the redheaded stepchild of the literary world. And people are like, should I even read that? I've had relatives come right to my face as a person who does write short stories and say, I hate short stories, like right to me.
Yeah.
And because people don't know what to do with them exactly. And yet places like Tachyon keep them alive and remind us that it's its own art form and it's really important and fun.
Yeah, and that's how most people came to to bring it back to Ray. That's how most people came to Ray Bradbury,
Oh, I
where
did.
they're like, how many people are like, oh, I hated reading in school. And then I read this Ray Bradbury short story about like someone that went to hunt a Tyrannosaurus and then they stepped on a butterfly and boom, that create a love affair of reading, or, you know, a sea monster that fell in love with a foghorn or things like that. This was where Ray really mastered the form of the short story and created so many reluctant readers that created a love of reading, like myself. I mean, I always tell my story of I was a struggling reader, but I found Ray and I just ran.
Yep. Yeah.
And many people share that story.
I think people think of stories as a stepping stool for writers, that you
Yeah.
do them and then you finish them and you do novels and
Yeah.
you get down to real business. But when you read stories like what Ray did, you realize they're a destination. I mean, you can go in there and hang out and you can keep coming back. I just reread Sound of Thunder. I don't know if it was like 2 months ago. But I mean, you can always just keep coming back to them. And some of the images in some of those stories, the Veld in particular, those haunt me at night to this day.
Yeah.
And another one, a very different kind of thing, but Edgar Allan Poe, the master of the short story
Yeah.
as well. Those stories, I read some of his, I had to force myself to forget them so that I could sleep at night.
Exactly.
So they can have enormous power. And we think just because they're short that they don't get the job done, but they just get a different job done.
I know. And one of the local channels for Antenna TV, my aunt, who's older, is playing the Ray Bradbury Theater, and she thought it was going to be a science fiction show. She didn't know it was going to be scary, and she's like, Dominic, these are scary. I said, yes, they are.
Exactly. And you can do that in a few pages.
In a few pages, yeah, it's the mastery. Well, thank you so much. Please tell folks again, not only where they can find your book, but find you on the internet.
So you'll probably want to look at the text on, typed out on YouTube.
Yeah.
I have a weird last name, but
Okay.
davidebenbach.com is a great place to start. That's my website, but you can also pretty easily find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook just by, searching for my name, David Ebenbach, and I'd love to connect.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for talking about your book about Mars and Ray Bradbury. And please check out How to Mars. And again, thank you, David, for your time, for your words, and for talking about Ray Bradbury.